I left Palestine right after the Six-Day War, which I actually spent the 6 days on the Green Line. And the Jerusalem I'd known was only East Jerusalem. I mean, now I say only, but at the time, I mean, it was a whole lived world, it was a whole community, it was a whole town for me. My Jerusalem was East Jerusalem, and the old city, Salah ad-Din Street, and then coming out this direction to where I live now, which is Sheikh Jarrah. And there was a wall, and there was some other place behind that wall, but I had no idea what was the place behind that wall. It was like a whole other universe. It was that somehow this whole place that I'd known, it had this sort of mirror opposite. This whole other culture, society, language, these other strange beings whose existence I had never even imagined. And all the time they'd been behind that wall. There was a wall in places separating the two sides of the city. And when you see some of the film footage now from '67, you see Israelis taking the wall down, you know, with great joy and fanfare.
Around Notre Dame?
Around the area of Notre Dame. And, well, and now, of course, the irony is, with lots of joy, they're putting up another wall. Yeah.
And generally, I mean, as culture or artistic or poetic against a kind of extremely pragmatical situation, does it have any role?
Definitely. I mean, and it probably has more roles than you're conceiving. I mean, here, for Palestinians, anybody who comes and wants to look is already doing a great service. Anybody who wants to come and see beyond what they're supposed to see or what they're supposed to know is an extremely important thing for us. And also the way other people see in these kinds of ways that you're doing, that, you know, is not sort of a violent, sort of dominant, regular way of representing what's happening, is also really wonderful. Because sometimes we get locked into how we see. I mean, there is a problem of that the world doesn't get to hear our story, right? Or our story gets manipulated and sort of turned on its head. But there's also a problem that we become sort of stuck in the ways that we see things over and over again. And it's really wonderful to have somebody coming who is not coming to aggressively say who we are or what things are, but is making an empathetic act at the same time, is pushing us to maybe see things or to think about doing things in different types of ways. And the other part of it, I think, was here is so saturated and so over-determined in terms of representation and discourse and power and politics that it's extremely hard to find a way to break through that in any way. And I think, you know, poetic acts is one way of breaking through that sort of completely, it sometimes just seems like it's just such a powerful closed box, and no one can speak to it, and nobody can shake it, and nobody can even make a hole in it. And so a poetic act is a very powerful thing to do in that context, because it says, you know, I refuse to serve the dominant ways of doing things. I mean, this is it's more than agitprop. I mean, I think a lot of Israelis would find this a form of terrorism, yeah? Because this line is erased, but everything is embedded in this line. you know. I mean, all of it, everything that they've tried to bury and all of the horrible secrets and all of the let's pretend is all in that line. So by marking it, I'm sure Israelis would get very upset. Or certain kinds of Israelis would get very upset. Did you have reactions when you were doing it?
Little, actually. Little, I don't think people recognized, yeah.
Because you're doing it very sneakily.
Yeah, I think I've learned to be discreet, and you know, it's just part of the landscape, urban landscape. And I had somebody who said poetical act is an act without possession.
That's a very nice way of saying it. It's without possession, but it's also a profoundly political act. But it's not a political act that gets consumed or locked in the way that the political is. For me, as importantly is, and I know the word solidarity sounds bad, or it's been made to sound sort of naive or silly, but it's pure human solidarity should never be underestimated. I mean, just pure human solidarity is, I think, probably one of the most important political acts in any way these days. There we go.
We should actually maybe...
I think you should have used a bigger can.
We've refilled a lot.
You what?
We've refilled every 300 meters. I mean, we've saved you of all the refillings, but they were constant. Do you think that the kind of meaningless, if you want, characteristic or property of a poetic act helps breaking in a kind of set configuration of a reality? Like it gives you a kind of, you know, a break-in.
You haven't shown this to a Palestinian audience yet because it hasn't been finished, right?
No.
But I can already tell you that one of the things that people are going to feel, which I feel very, not strongly, but that I relate to very strongly, is the sneakiness with which you're doing what you're doing. Your pose here is exactly like a Palestinian. I mean, a Palestinian, especially a man, actually, is much worse, or a young man. To do anything under this regime has to walk the way you're walking. And what's so wonderful is you're doing this sort of mini terrorist act as you're going. I mean, it's like an everyday form of resistance that Palestinians wouldn't have thought about. It's stupid to say Palestinians, but you know what I mean, right? I mean, only a conceptual artist person would have come up with this kind of thing.
Can you say just a couple more words about the what you mean about like a Palestinian, whatever, sneaking?
You know, when you cross over there, you always feel like a sneak. You always feel like, I mean, even me, right? Sure. But there's always this way in which you can't just be relaxed and natural walking through a city. You're always, because there's a Palestinian here now, you're always a criminal. You just are. Because just by dint of your being here, you are somehow illegal. That somehow you're undercover. You have to be undercover. I mean, now that line, they've made it very visible again without them realizing it, because they put up little police checkpoints all along what then became Highway 1 between east and west, so that anybody wanting to go over to the west, you know, they're stopped by these group of border police. But for young guys, young Palestinian men walking around Jerusalem, it's a complete nightmare. I mean, they have to be so buried deep in themselves to walk across that line to go west. They have to pull their whole being deep down into themselves in order just to be able to walk across that line where they're going to get stopped.
What would be your
No, I mean, for me, there's a physical reality that they've gone beyond the two-state, and I was a two-statist until maybe 2-3 years ago, right? It's like, green line, let's go back to the green line. Well, you know, it's the amount that they've transformed everything, and the way that the whole thing, they've become implanted in our body, and the operation to disimplant them, I just think is impossible.
So try to translate like physically, and if you can't separate, then you put it together. Okay?
Some form of binationalism, yeah. I mean, I think that's the only way to do it. With the physical transformation that they've put in place, and also given the politics within Israel, any two-state solution now is going to be just Bantustans for us. And I refuse a Bantustan. I don't care what they call it, if they call it an independent state, but it's still a Bantustan. It's a Bantustan. It's not a... It's... And so at some point it just has to break into some kind of a recognition of the profound way in which we're connected. And we're connected in the most sick, destructive kind of way. But there's no way to be disconnected. So the only way is it's going to be a long, nasty process. I think if people finally coming to realize that that's it, there's no other way. Mm-hmm. If Israelis want to stay living over here, right, but they can't keep oppressing Palestinians, then over here has to be shared and over there has to be shared. It's the only way.
The young generation, both sides eventually, is any kind of more open to accept, if you want,
I think that
the existence and the...
most of my students at the universities, you know, they're in their 20s. They don't know Israelis. They've never known Israelis except for soldiers and settlers. And it's probably the same thing with most Israelis their age. They've only known Palestinians, you know, when they've been wearing an army outfit. And so the really terrible thing is that it's the older generations that actually have much more of a memory and can sort of see about the possibility than the younger generations. The younger generations, I think, are ultimately much more right-wing. But the older generations completely failed them. I mean, all of the political leaderships have completely failed them. So that's why, you know, I think it's going to take a long, nasty working out process. They're going to try this two-state solution, which is an apartheid. And maybe over a period of time, that will awaken some kind of, you know, consciousness among another generation of Israelis. Palestinians, a lot of Palestinians now, regardless of not knowing Israelis, you know, I see young people, they all talk about binationalism. They talk about it because they're sick of living within a prison which is their city. You know, they're sick of being, you know, a criminal with no future. Exactly. Yeah. You notice he's got green line all over. You have no green line.